Welcome back to Around the Cauldron, where we talk theology, philosophy, and everyday life as a modern witch. Today I had the pleasure of interviewing Katherine May, author of Wintering, an interesting book with a perspective on this idea of wintering that we're actually going to talk about in the interview. It's not necessarily witchy, pagan, or polytheistic, but I definitely feel like it's something that we as spiritual or nature in tune people can definitely benefit from. So I do hope you enjoy this interview. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today I have Katherine on the show. Katherine, thank you so much for joining me here around the Cauldron. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. So for anyone that doesn't know who you are, would you please give an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, I am the author of Wintering, which is a book all about kind of harnessing the power of the dark season of the year, I suppose, and sort of learning to relish it and to get the most out of it, and to therefore to cope with the darkest times in life. I live in Whitstable in the UK, in the very far southeast, right by the sea. That's very important to me. I'm just very drawn to water in general, but particularly the sea, and you can often find me swimming in there. I don't know what else to tell you about myself, really. I like walking, and I have a dog and a cat. Well, I actually have two cats, but one of them is rarely with us. She does her own thing. Apparently that's none of our business. And a husband and a son. That's me.
Wonderful. So since we're here, we're basically discussing your book and the idea of wintering. I have personally read it. I really enjoyed it. I took my time with it. It actually came to me in the midst of moving from one crappy apartment and dealing with a bunch of nonsense to owning a house. And, I was kind of going through my own moment of wintering at that point. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and what exactly wintering entails?
Sure. So, I mean, wintering's a word I've borrowed, really. It comes from the natural sciences, and it's used to describe the way that animals and plants survive the cold. And I'm not the first writer to borrow it either. Sylvia Plath made great use of it. So did Seamus Heaney. So did Caroline Duffy. So it's quite interesting that loads of writers have been really inspired by this idea of wintering. And I use it to mean a time in our life when we feel kind of thrown out from mainstream society. So we might feel cut off from the people that we know and love. We might feel kind of unable to act. It's that feeling that there's almost a layer of glass between you and everything else. And that can come from all sorts of things, from mental or physical illness, from a big life event like a divorce, or losing your job, or a bereavement. But also, I mean, sometimes winterings just come along when we're ready for a change, and quite often we're not very good at reading that change or seeing it coming or understanding what it is. So we often kind of drop out for a while we're figuring it out. And that I go out of my way in the book to say that, like, it's always a painful time. This isn't something that's like, oh, hey, I'm going to show you how lovely it is when your whole life falls apart. I'm not doing that in the book. I'm saying very clearly that, this is about experiencing real pain, but learning to walk with it rather than to keep trying to avoid it. And that's where we find kind of knowledge and wisdom. That's the kind of summary. But in the process, I draw on the sort of, metaphorical world of winter, because I'm a great lover of the cold rather than the hot. So that's definitely the way I run.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I do want to make the delineation, though, just for anybody listening or watching, between wintering and mental health. So the idea of wintering is not tied directly to mental health. It's not like depression
Mm.
or anything of the sort, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, like a kind of mental health crisis might lead you into a wintering, but it certainly isn't the same thing, no.
Okay. Okay, good. I think that's really an important distinction to make, especially for
Mm,
myself too, because I do have a couple of different mental health issues that I regularly deal with. And I
mm.
could feel within the book that wintering and any sort of mental health crisis or concern or issue are completely separate and they're not together. They can be together,
They can
but
be, yeah,
wintering is
that's right,
not
yeah.
the same. Yeah,
It's like
just
a
that
Venn
wintering.
diagram, you know?
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah,
definitely like a Venn diagram.
yeah.
Um, so, as for yourself, how do you see this idea of wintering mirrored in nature? Because that was one thing that you wrote about
Mm,
in your book is the sort of um, mirror, I guess,
mm.
between how the natural world goes through wintering cycles and how we can move along with it too.
Yeah, so I mean, like wintering is the business of nature. And what was really interesting was when I was researching the book, I spoke to lots of kind of experts in various kind of like animals. You know, I spoke to a beekeeper, I spoke to a conservationist who looks after dormice. And everyone kept saying to me, these animals, their whole life is actually pointed towards winter. Winter isn't this aberration in their life. It's not, they don't see it as an anomaly. Um, they spend all of the summer preparing for winter. And actually, we can kind of reorient ourselves to understand that winter is the really important season to survive.
Mhm.
And so, you know, we see it in hibernation. We see it in, I mean, very few animals actually hibernate. A lot of the animals we think hibernate actually go into a torpor. So bears are an example, you know, they'll go in and out of deep sleep, but they won't go into that deep state of hibernation. But also like other animals who have to take special measures to survive the winter. And bees are a great example of that. You know, like at the end of the summer, they essentially kill off any like worker bees that aren't needed anymore. They kill off all the men in the hive, sorry, men. And they kind of cluster together, like hunker down in the hive and do like work really hard to keep warm. So all that honey that we, you know, think is just such this, you know, lovely sweet treat is what the bees make to live through winter. And they eat honey in the winter and they take turns to dislocate their wings so that they can kind of drive the little motor that normally runs them to keep the hive warm. So there's all these like really alchemical kind of magical things that happen in the winter. And of course, there's also the really familiar sight of trees dropping their leaves, which again is such an important time for trees. You know, it's not a dead time. It's not a moment when the trees aren't doing anything. It's the moment when the trees are like at their most important. And I love that. I love the way that nature kind of really values and treasures winter. But also takes it very seriously and doesn't try and, you know, pretend that maybe it won't come this year or that it isn't important. And I think that's got like massive resonance for all of us, really.
And so for me,
You
it
need some
kind of,
honey for that poor throat, I think.
I've got a bit of honey in my tea.
Good.
Um, so for me, I kind of, it connects back to how a lot of pagans and polytheists are animists. You know, we see the spirits and the life in everything around us. And we often, in our modern time, you know, we have our houses, we're in our own little boxes. We leave when we need to, we come home and we don't really do much else. And I really like that connection back to nature, how we can see that even though the tree looks like it's dead or it looks like it's not doing anything because it
Mm,
doesn't have its leaves or anything like that, it's actually sort of in a state of hibernation. You know, it's holding on to everything that it needs to hold on to in order to grow new leaves in the springtime.
mm,
And I
yeah.
really enjoyed the connection between the natural world and this concept of wintering to
Mm,
how we can use that in our own lives as well. I really liked your book, if you can't tell.
I'm so pleased. But you know what, to draw on your point about the trees, and I think like this is so true of humans, the trees, by the time they are in that kind of dormant stage, those leaves are already there. The buds are already on the trees by the time the leaves have dropped off them. And so like that, the sort of seeds of that new phase are there. And it's this sense of like there being this running cycle and connectivity, which I know, you know, like is definitely really important in various pagan beliefs, you know, that there's not this like pause when everything's just not doing anything. It's like there's equal importance all the way through that wheel of the year, and everything is leading on to the next thing, and everything is running on, and everything is significant. I think that's, you know, like often like we find in those times in our life when stuff is really hard, that we think that that's like a not an important time, that we've, you know, that we're not relevant. But actually, God, you know, these are the moments when we are fostering that next phase, and when we're like processing really, really important things that we have to process. And I think, you know, we don't give ourselves enough credit for the work we do when we pause.
Yeah, and I can absolutely feel that right now. So this is going to come out in a couple of weeks from today when we're recording this. So for anybody that's watching, so they have a point of reference. With my surgery that I had 2 days ago, and you know, I'm feeling great and I'm up and I'm moving around. I'm like, I can't do nothing. Yeah. I can't just sit and do nothing. I can't just sit and pause. And so I'm having to draw on that idea of, yes, you can take a break, rest, go through what you need to go through so you can heal, that it's okay. And I know that's kind of on the extremer side, you know, having a surgery. But
it's not though, you know, like that's what we do. Like we don't ever let ourselves rest. And I mean, honestly, the number of people that talk to me about this and they push on through the most extreme circumstances because they have never felt that entitlement to just stop. And also like we don't know what to do when we stop. It's an active practice, stopping. It's not something that just occurs. Like we have no idea who we are if we pause.
Yes.
That's why we should do it, you know, right? Sorry to be yeah.
No, it definitely resonates. And I found myself highlighting several little passages or just sentences in your book where I'm like, the honesty here is real. And you know, I think even in the first section of it where you were talking about like being on vacation and your husband got sick, and at first you're just like, oh, you know, it's like the man flu, right? You know, oh, he'll be okay. But then
not my finest hour.
Yeah, but then, you know, we turn around, we're like, oh, maybe we actually do need to pause and take a second and be present in the moment to see what's going on with the people around us. And I was like, you're brave for putting that in a book. But also, like, I definitely appreciated the honesty in that, because I have felt that before. I'm like, oh, you know what? You'll be fine. You know, you're just overstimulated, or you just have a little cough, or it's allergies or whatever. But having that ability to step back, you know, and be honest, but also be able to listen, I feel is an important aspect of what's going on. Because if you can't listen to other people, how are you going to be able to listen to yourself?
You know, like I think one of the most destructive elements of our society is that we always have a plan, you know, like we all have a calendar. And I don't know about yours, but mine is blocked off in little blocks all through the day. I've always got, you know, like on the days when I have an empty calendar, I feel slightly panicked. It's like, who am I today? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, and when that happens to me, I'm like, did I miss something?
Yeah.
Like, if something needs to fill this
what have I deleted?
What's missing? Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, that plan can take over, can't it? And it can stop us from really noticing. And, you know, quite often my weekends are booked up 6 weeks ahead. It's endless. It's really endless what we do and what we try to fit in. And I now try and like space my calendar differently. I try and book in pauses and gaps and empty days, you know, and that means we can do stuff spontaneously, but it also means I can do nothing sometimes, because I have, like, my mental and physical health has suffered very, very badly in the past from exhaustion and burnout, and it will do again. Like, you know, I'm learning my lesson, but I am an imperfect little human being, and I will not ever take it in, you know, entirely. So you know, I'm more and more conscious of setting boundaries, and that means like defending myself very hard against other people too, which is the toughest.
So, what advice would you give to anybody, without, you know, revealing all the secrets in your book, about wintering and how to sort of go with the flow and not necessarily accept, you know, the hard things that are coming, because that's a different topic, I think. But to just sort of move through it. How does the average person cope with wintering when we still have jobs and, you know, partners to take care of, kids to take care of?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, in lots of ways, I think loads of us wait until it's gone so far that we have to stop. You know, like, loads of us wait until we have a complete physical collapse or mental collapse, and that's, you know, like, in those kind of winterings are easy in a way because, like, you cannot do anything. And I think loads of us wait until we're forced into being on our backs, more or less. But you know, as we try and get wiser towards these things and accept them as part of our natural human cycle, and not something that's come because we've screwed up or because we're rubbish or because we, you know, like, we are the only person that's ever had something go wrong. Like, that, you know, all of our society leads us to believe that, and it just isn't true. Like, once we can begin to accept that, I think we can begin to see our winters coming, to feel them, to feel that change in ourselves. You know, if we're making enough space to listen, to like meditate or to reflect, or, you know, just walk sometimes, or whatever reflective thing is useful, then we have to begin to feel permission to cut back. And, you know, like, our commitments are often not just like work and you know, childcare or like elder care or whatever it is we're engaged in. There's often a million other things around that we tell ourselves we must take part in order to be a useful citizen. And I am absolutely here to tell everyone that when I'm like, when times are getting hard and I'm not coping, like, I'm autistic, we haven't talked about that yet, but like, let's put that out there in this conversation, because that's really important, because it means that I can get incredibly overwhelmed by the world around me. And I, you know, and I can really, really crash, and then my brain and my body can get into a state where it can't get back on top of normal life for like a year, like literally a year, you know. And like, so for me now, when I see that stuff coming, I start cancelling stuff out of my diary left, right, and centre. Like, I leave societies and organisations, and, you know, I cancel my child's clubs as well, because I can't cope with driving him around to that shit all the time. And I start saying no to friends when they ask me out in the evening, and like, my really good friends who love me enough and who understand me and don't judge me get it, and like, hope you're okay, take a break, we're here when you come back. I like duck out of family events, I cut down, you know, festivals and stuff like that. I retreat, I stop showing up. And this is the thing that people find really hard, I stop over helping other people. Like, when I'm feeling well, I love helping, I love doing everything I can, I love, you know, checking in with everyone and making sure they're okay. That's really good for me when I'm well. When I'm not well, it's not good for me. can't do it. Can't do
Mm-hmm.
it. And like we're trained to be good girls, and nice guys and all that kind of thing. And we have this vision of what we have to do. But if that is harming us, we must learn to cut back and to have honest conversations about that. And if people can't respect you when you need to do it, we're talking about a need here. We're not talking about like a spa day to have your toenails painted because they'll look pretty. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about like basic self-care. People that can't respect that are not great people to have in your life. Like, honestly, that's as brutal as I am about it. I think it's so important.
I think that's great advice. And
Absolutely
as you're
brutality.
talking, it's reminding me of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah,
Where you're well and you've got, you're up there, but
yeah.
then you start to get to a point where things are just getting tough. And so you've got to make sure your basic needs are met first before you can have any other obligations.
You have to like travel back down that pyramid sometimes, and then when things start going well, you can scale that pyramid again.
Yeah.
But like if we don't take care of ourselves soon enough, those very basic things start getting threatened too. We like that, that sort of food and shelter thing. We lose our ability to provide that for ourselves if we reach such a crisis that we can't provide it, and so like it's so necessary to take care of ourselves much earlier on in the process than that, and to know what's essential and what's nice to have, and to know
Mm-hmm.
the difference.
Yeah. And um, you talked about, the people that you have in your life and the people that, if they can't respect your decisions and your need to take a break, then you probably shouldn't have them in your life. The podcast that I just released for the end of June, actually, the end of June, I think it was the end of June, was actually discussing the importance of community. And in my case, it's community in occult spaces because that's what I talk about. But it definitely ties into how important it is to have a support system. And one of the stories that you wrote about is when you were looking for someone to go swimming with year round, and how you met up with someone and you both were kind of like, you played off of each other's support.
Definitely,
to go into the freezing cold water and last for like 3 minutes. And
it was at 30 seconds, first of all. Let's not big it up.
Oh yeah, 30 seconds first. But definitely relying on that support to help each other out. And I was going somewhere with that.
You were about like community and support networks.
Yeah. And you were both like reminding each other, you got to breathe through it, breathe and let it. And then, when you need to get the heck out of the freezing cold water, it's okay. So definitely having a support system during a period of wintering is important, and at least I would say.
Yeah, and like that's what we did there, which is really interesting, does model what a good community does, which was, on one hand, it kind of egged me forward to reach like the limits of what I was brave enough to do, but it also kept me safe at the same time, and like held me back from going too far. Like, get out as soon as you're cold, like, and a bad community, and I've seen bad cold swimming communities in action actually, and they get really macho about everybody like trying to stay in the longest, and like pushing people past what their bodies are feeding back to them, and what's wise, and what's, like Barbara Carrellis always has the phrase safe and sane. What's safe and sane when it comes to, I mean, she writes about sex. I mean, it's really relevant to swimming.
It is relevant
swimming. So similar. And like, I think good communities are very elastic actually, and they will encompass those people that will always love to be right at the center of the community. Like, sorry, my light flashes on and off while I'm talking, and it's really annoying, and I don't like, nothing's changing in the room, but my camera just doesn't handle it. It looks like I'm in some kind of a disco, and it's not that exciting. But yeah, so good communities are really elastic, and they will stretch to meet all those different kinds of people and the different ways they want to interact with it, and how that changes at different points in their life as well. And like great communities taking people like me who always want to lurk on the edges. Like, I never want to be right in the middle of things. I won't turn up to that much stuff, but I'll always like egg people on in the sidelines, and if people are collecting money, I'll always put money in that, but I won't necessarily want to be there all the time, because I find social life really exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many different ways of taking and giving support, but if you're only ever giving, you're actually not playing a full part in that community, because you're not giving your community a chance to take care of you, which is, believe it or not, what people want to do. Like, they want to help, they love helping, they get a lot out of helping, and like, to take help is a skill and a practice, and it's sometimes a painful thing that we have to learn, because we sometimes have been brought up in a way that teaches us that it's dangerous to take help, or that it's degrading to take help. And actually, receiving help and receiving love and care is a really important part of the transaction.
Now, in the pagan sphere, and I can't say we as a blanket statement, because there are many of us and we all like to do things differently. But we tend to have daily practices that we do, even just in a spiritual sense. How can we sort of ritualize this idea of wintering and sitting with ourselves to maybe notice when a period of wintering is coming, and maybe when we need to take that sort of break?
I bet it's very similar, really, because actually I do think it's about learning to pause on a daily basis, and to refocus your attention on a daily basis, whether or not everything's going well, and if you can be consistent with that checking in, then you have half a chance of feeling that cycle turning. And that can be a ritual. Actually, I think rituals are like a really lovely way to like have a rhythm to your day. I mean, I meditate every day, or I try to. Like, every day is maybe a bit of a stretch sometimes, but like I do my best.
I feel that.
I mean, well,
Yeah.
But given that life does sometimes get so busy, I also have lots of tiny pauses in my day that really help me to just take a minute if I've got it. So the first thing I do in the morning when I get up is I open the door and I sniff the air. And it's tiny, but it is really significant, because there's all this information that's being conveyed to you about where you are in the year and what the weather's like, and that kind of stuff. But also, you in that short time, you can tune in with your gut and notice how stuff's going. And I find that kind of tiny ritual really important. Like, at the moment, I'm dealing with the thing that I think a lot of people are post-pandemic, or like as we're beginning to ease out of the pandemic, which is that my attention is shot. I mean, I feel like all my thoughts are like floating around me, and I try and pin them down, and they kind of pop out like balloons again and float up in the air. And so I'm really working on that at the moment, because I really can see that if that goes on, that could become something a lot darker and more sinister, and a lot more muddled. And so actually, I'm being very disciplined about my meditations at the moment. I'm making sure I make time to like walk and exercise. That's very grounding. It opens up reflective space always, and I'm also doing morning pages, which I only ever do when I'm feeling crisis prone. Like, I'm so bad at routine. I'll never do it forever. But I find it really helpful to just sit down and empty my head every day. It helps stuff to anchor. And I quite often use scent as well. I find scent very grounding. So I'll kind of burn oils, or, really nice candles, not the horrible ones that always smell a bit sicky. The fancy ones, because I'm worth it. Like things like that, I think like they're really tiny, but you know, like when I'm lighting a candle, I'm expressing a hope, you know, I'm making a dedication almost. I always light a candle before I start a session like this, because I think it's really important to dedicate that space in a very intentional way, and to come into this with, like, you know, good intentions and goodwill,
Mhm.
rather than like cynically or unfeelingly or distantly. Like all of that stuff really matters
Mhm.
to me.
Yeah, that's funny because I have my altar space over here out of
Ah,
frame of the
lovely.
camera, and it always has a candle going. Um, but I like that about how setting the intention for your day and just taking the time to really reflect on what you're feeling and
Mm.
maybe giving yourself that space to be honest about how you're
Yeah,
feeling. I feel
yeah.
like embracing this idea of wintering definitely requires a lot of honesty with yourself.
Absolutely.
And do you have any tips on how to embrace that honesty with yourself? Because I know a lot of people don't want to admit to themselves, I'm guilty of it too, of when I'm feeling
Mm.
bad, or, when I might be irritated for no reason, or just having a really crappy day. And
Mm.
that honesty can kind of escape me. Like if I say it out loud and
Yeah,
other people hear it, then it makes me a bad person,
right.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah, you feel guilty
do you
about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely a lot of guilt, especially
yeah.
even as a mom too. So I'm like,
Oh man, yeah.
I gotta be there. I can't have a bad day as a mom. What are you talking about? Do you have any tips
Yeah.
on embracing that sort of honesty that you have to bring in the wintering?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a quick fix, but I think it's about checking in regularly, really, and just noticing your feelings, and you know, seeing sadness and anger and you know, like all those really uncomfortable emotions that come up as having equal value to happiness. And I've been trying to model it to my son. I mean, there's a section in the book about, you know, me taking my son out of school when he began to really struggle.
Hmm.
And I really, as I thought about that, I mean, we did it in a sort of sense of crisis, not in like a, oh wow, this is gonna be really positive. It was like, oh, how are we gonna cope
Hmm.
with this?
Right.
Um, but as we spent some time together, I realized that I really wanted him to value, like, what he was feeling. I didn't want to move him on from it, or to tell him that he was fine or should be fine, or was making a fuss, or that everything was great and he should count his blessings. You know, I didn't want to do that. I wanted him to get to the core of his sadness and to feel safe in having it, and to know that it's actually a safe space that's very informative, as long as we make it safe. Like I could have made it very unsafe for him by denying it, but I wanted to make it safe and hold it. And I've noticed him telling other people that now, like, it's okay, you know, you're sad. And I don't think most adults ever accept that. And I think it's work for loads of us to do, to really engage with those, like, this powerful cloud of emotions that comes to us, and we only acknowledge 5% of it. That's crazy. Like, this amazing stuff is being fed into us that is so full of self-knowledge and intuition and, like, wisdom, and like all those really big things that we want. And we can take it in, but we have to choose to, you know. And that's why we make space. That's why those quiet times are really important, because it's knocking at the door waiting to come into us. And of course it's overwhelming when it comes, because
Hmm.
we've held it back for so long. But yeah, it comes eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll come.
It'll come. It will.
It'll
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to embrace the different cycles, especially as someone who tends to follow a cyclical cycle anyway, with the
Mm.
celebrations of my faith and what I believe. It's mm, it's not that difficult, I guess, for me, someone who already follows
Yeah.
a cyclical belief system, to
Mm.
just embrace another cycle, because everything comes in cycles. The
Yeah.
seasons, different phases of your life, even different different hobbies, at least for me anyway, things go in cycles. I'm like, oh, I like this thing. Now I like this thing. And then it, just,
I'm so there. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back and forth. So I definitely encourage other people to embrace this sort of period of introspection and rest and pause, even if they don't take it on in the full extent of wintering and, being able to just completely clear schedules. Because, that's not probable or possible for absolutely everybody. But I think just making space, even for a few minutes a day, can definitely make a big difference in anybody's life. See, I think we pretty much covered everything that I had written down. Is there anything that you want to make sure that people know? Anything that you want to say before we start shutting down here and signing off?
No, I'm good. It's been a really interesting conversation. So yeah, yeah.
Great. Okay, so do you want to let people know where they can find you online, website, social media, things of that sort?
Okay, so I always forget major things here, so please jog me if there's something that I should tell people.
And I'll put all of the links and everything will be in descriptions and show notes. So if you forget something, it's okay. I'll have it.
I do some stuff somewhere, I don't know. I am on Twitter as _Katherine_May_. It's the kind of Twitter handle that looks fine but sounds really weird when you say it out loud. I am on Instagram as Katherine May_. I hate Facebook, so you can't find me there. Well, you can, but I won't be there.
That's fair.
I have a podcast called The Wintering Sessions, where I talk to writers about wintering periods in their life. I've done 2 seasons of that now, so that's beginning to bed in a bit. I really enjoyed that. My website is katherine-may.com, and I run courses for writers, which are restarting in September if anyone's interested in writing their memoir. So I know there's always some people that are wanting to write about themselves, so you can sign up to my mailing list for that, and I'll tell you all about it later when it's next launching.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will include all of the links in the description and in the show notes for both the YouTube and podcast, because we'll be on both of them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You'll probably do it better than I did.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here and chatting with me about your book. I did really enjoy it. I don't know if you're watching on YouTube. It's actually sitting back here. This
I should wear your
bright,
too, shouldn't I? Right.
Bright orange. I really enjoyed it.
Have you noticed though? Look, don't put it next to your face because it makes you look really washed out. Look, it's bad. Look at that. It's not good. It's not good for the skin tone. This is what you notice when you've had to do that a few times.
It's all right. So yeah, I guess for everybody else, we will talk to you soon. Bye for now.
It's been so lovely to talk to you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed our discussion about wintering, hearing a little bit about Katherine, and also hearing how I think wintering can play a part in my fellow spiritual people's lives. If you'd like to get a copy of Wintering for yourself, you can check out the link in the show notes. Also, be sure to check out Katherine's social media if you're interested in following her there, and I will talk to you all very soon.